Hey guys, what's going on? Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, here to do a review on the Whitney Houston biopic. I want to dance with somebody. 2022 biopic about Haley's. What's going on? About the life of Whitney Houston, starring Naomi Ake as Whitney Houston. Some people might know Naomi Ake from uh, television series like Doctor Who and also Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, in which she played the part of Jara. Well, here she does a superb job in playing the part of Whitney Houston. Even though I think more so than looking like Whitney, she actually looked a lot like Brandy. Uh, Lisa saying put the words movie review in the title. I will because I don't want to get a copyright strike like I did before. But contrary, and I won't put any music of Whitney Houston. But like I was saying, this actress Naomi Ake actually looked more like Brandy than Whitney Houston. She had a look, a facial structure like Brandy. When Lisa and I watched it, we were struck by how much she actually looked like Brandy, which is ironic because on this channel, one of my most popular videos is the 1997 rendition of Cinderella, starring Whitney Houston and Brandy. Whitney Houston is the fairy godmother, and Brandy as Cinderella. So it was ironic that this actress, Naomi Ake, actually kind of resembled Brandy. Now, it starts off with a flashback from the 1994 American Music Awards, in which Whitney is singing or going to sing a melody of Loves You Porgy. Um, uh, I am telling you, and I have nothing. And this is one of the three hardest songs to sing, as she alludes to earlier in the movie, because of its vocal range. After that, it flashes to 1983 when she is at her mom's church in Newark, New Jersey, where she is first learning how to sing. And Sissy Houston is stressing to her the importance of carrying on her legacy, because Sissy Houston in the gospel world was one of the most well renowned singers. So she wants to stress to Whitney the importance of being committed to something. Whitney herself wanted to sing, Whitney just wanted to perform, and Sissy, is telling her, listen, you have to take, um, this singing business serious. You can't play around with it. It's nothing to play with. It's nothing to fool with. And Whitney, true to her nickname, which was Nippy, is very nippy and snappy with her comebacks. And she's basically telling her mother, I just want to sing. I I don't want to be bogged down. And her mom is stressing to her the vocal range, and then she just blows it out the park. You know, when she's practicing with her mom, and then it goes from there. She's sitting on the basketball court outside her neighborhood, and she is listening to Stevie Wonder on the headset, and she's introduced to Robin Crawford, who is played by Nefessa Williams in this. And her and Robin Crawford, they hit it off pretty well, and you could tell by the eye contact that they're already making with each other that Whitney is the one flirting. Whitney is giving her flirting eyes, and they're just laughing it up, and they actually end up. Um, she actually ends up walking Whitney home, and then when she's walking Whitney home, Whitney is telling her that she's related to Rita Franklin, that she's related to Dionne Warwick, and at first Robin doesn't really believe her, and of course she's related to her mom, Susie Houston. Now she has this legacy in music, and she's like Robin's like, wow, there were just really big shoes to fill when it comes to that. And Whitney's like, yeah, but I just want to sing. That's all I really want to do. To what she was, similar to what she was telling her mom earlier, that she just wants to sing. She's not really worried about fulfilling any kind of legacy or any kind of um, you know that sort of stuff. And then she invites Robin to the performance that her mom is giving later on that night. And at this performance, you could tell that her and Robin are giving each other flirting eyes as well. And it's here that when Sissy first notices that Whitney is giving flirting type eyes, and they're basically flirting with their mannerisms, not so much with their words, but with their mannerisms with each other. As Robin is sitting in the audience, Sissy is singing, and Whitney's up there singing background, and you could tell by there's no dialogue here, but you could tell just by the glances that they're giving at one another that you know there was an attraction there. And from there they continue on their friendship and their relationship. But as Whitney comes home, she's disturbed to find that her parents, are arguing. One of the major reasons they're arguing is because, well, just like in Whitney's later life, her mom became the sole breadwinner of the family. And like we talked about in other videos regarding really successful women and less successful men, a lot of times this can cause a man to feel some type of way in a relationship. And was the case with Whitney's dad, you know. And this is the gist of the argument between um, Whitney's father, John, and Whitney's mom, that Sissy's the sole breadwinner and Sissy's always out on tour. And the father felt like, he kind of felt inferior. But Whitney is hearing this at the same time this is going on. Whitney is actually hearing all this going on, all this racket. And she's sitting at the stairs. And it's from there that she later goes into her brother's room and she is first exposed to drugs. Now, what I liked about this scene was that it's finally admitting what they admitted a while ago after Whitney died, but they didn't really admit when Whitney was alive, was that her brother was the one that really exposed her first to drugs. Man, for many years, and this is something they allude to in the movie, we were led to believe by the silence, the complicit silence of Whitney's family during that time, that it was Bobby Brown that led her into drugs, that it was Bobby Brown that was the bad influence on her. In fact, in the other Lifetime movie, uh, they basically go along with this narrative, and it, we're led to believe that it was Bobby Brown as well. But excuse me, gotta stay hydrated. In this scene here is confirming that it was actually Whitney Houston's brother who had her first initially experimenting with drugs right under the parents' roof, like in the next room. In fact, when I was watching it with my mom, she actually thought Whitney went somewhere else to another friend's house. But no, it was actually under the parents' roof within the next room. So I don't I don't know if the parents were a little bit delusional or whatever have you, thinking that that the kids weren't up to this. But I guess Sissy was just so wrapped up in her career, and the father was just thinking about the money, thinking about how he can capitalize, or as he later put it in the movie, turn first Sissy and then Whitney into a brand. But anyway, yeah, that's when she starts to experiment with drugs, and also her and Robin. After this, they become closer. It shows them on the basketball court. It really shows them hugging. And there's one scene when Whitney is dancing They're dancing in their living room. They're sliding across the floor in their socks, a la Tom Cruise in Risky Business. And Whitney just grabs Robin, and Whitney starts kissing her. So that led Lisa and I to believe that Whitney was the forward one when it came to flirting with people, because even on the basketball court, that scene, Whitney was really the one doing the initial flirting with the eyes. And then here, Whitney's the one to make the first move. So Whitney was a very forward person when it came to liking somebody and flirting with them and making the first move. But her and Robin, they take their relationship to the next level. Right now, at this point, they're committed to one another. They're not, really open necessarily about it. But there is one scene where Whitney's moving out of her parents' house, and Robin's there by the car, and Whitney's arguing with her mom. Her mom's going down the stairs, and she's just straight walking out as her mom is telling her, "Whitney, don't leave, don't leave, don't do this, don't leave." But Whitney leaves anyway. Now, in regards to her music career, there's a performance that Sissy Houston does where Sissy was supposed to sing lead like they always did, but then Sissy makes believe that something happened with her voice. She blames it on Whitney. She says, "See, you have me out here arguing, and because of that, I lost my voice, and you're gonna have to sing for me." And she sings "The Greatest Love of All." Now, it was obvious to anyone who watched this scene that uh, that Sissy was just trying to get Whitney on stage because Clyde Davis, who was played by Stanley Tucci in this movie, was there in attendance. Clyde Davis from Arista Records was there in attendance, and Sissy wanted, Whitney to get this record deal. But one thing Lisa and I were confused about, we were always under the impression that The Greatest Love of All was released after um, she initially got famous and she initially got successful. But apparently that wasn't the case, because here they are singing it um, in this like audition thing. So Whitney sings the song, she blows it out the water, and Clyde Davis just looks over to the guy that's sitting next to him, and he's like, "I just heard the greatest voice of her generation." And he immediately signs her to a contract, or attempts to sign her to a contract, takes her down to the meeting. And then they show the meeting between Whitney's family and Clyde Davis and Whitney's dad. And this is when Whitney's dad um, becomes her sole manager, because you know from all these biopic movies we always think, or we always know that um, we're going to think that the record executive is going to be the one to take advantage and be greedy and do the artist dirty. We saw it so many times in a lot of these biopic movies. TLC with Pebbles, and Elvis with Colonel Tom Parker, or um, NWA with Jerry Heller. So we initially were under the impression that Clive Davis is going to be the one to really take advantage of Whitney. And that's what the audience is led to believe, until John Huston steps in. He says, "No, I want my daughter to have special provisions in her contract that if she were to ever want to leave Arista Records, that she would be able to opt out of that, and she would have, reasonable creative control." And Clive, he says that they've never done that for an artist. That's unprecedented. Clive, he's had success with other mainstream rock acts like Janis Joplin over the years, Barry Manilow over the years, but he's never really had somebody in the R&B range, which later um, would come to be a major point of contention in the way that he was to market Whitney Houston. But from here, uh, we see John Houston taking, uh, you know, charge of Whitney's career, and she signs the contract. And in the contract is the phrase, and it's a phrase that will be used in the movie a lot. You know, from perpetuity throughout the universe. It's basically a key phrase that we'll see popping up in the movie a lot. It's like one of the signatures of the film. But they sign the deal, and Clyde Davis, has a discussion with her. He shares wine with Whitney. But even at this point, when he's sharing the wine with Whitney, he's noticing that she's really overzealous when it comes to the wine. He has to actually take the glass of wine away from Whitney. That's how overzealous she is. But in this conversation, he steps in and he says, "Listen, I don't interfere or intervene with any of the personal affairs of any of my artists. I'm not a camp counselor. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not, a personal counselor or a therapist. I'm just a record executive. I'll be there for you when it comes to music. I'll help you write the music," because he says to Whitney, "Can you write music?" And she says no. So he says, "I will have my best record producers, um, you know, working with you to craft some of the biggest hits in the world," because he really believed in her. He really believed in her potential. So he gets her hooked up in a Merv Griffin show. And on the Merv Griffin show, she sings the Stephanie Mills song "Home" from the Broadway play The Miz. I mean, The Wiz. Sorry, has nothing to do with the wrestler, The Wiz. Um, and during this performance, Sissy Houston actually takes control of the orchestra. She's saying, "Oh, it's too slow tempo. I mean, it's not the right tempo." And even the father, who's usually overbearing, he's trying to calm her down. But she goes on the man's show, on Merv Griffin's show, and starts, um, conducting uh, the background music. She basically just, I mean, Sissy Houston just basically hijacked the entire show. And it's like, I said to Lisa, I'm like, how can they let her do that? Like really, she has that kind of pull, you know? But apparently she did. She did. You know what I mean? Uh, Clyde Davis is sitting in the chair next to Merv Griffin, and he gave the go ahead. He's like, yeah, go ahead and do it. But as they're stepping out of on the elevator after this performance, no, actually it was after the meeting with Clyde Davis, you could start to see both Whitney's mom and dad comment on her looks. They're basic and her image. They're basically saying that the way she looked, she had the short blonde hair at the time. She dressed just in her regular jeans. In fact, she says this is her best pair of jeans. She's figuring that she's looking, really good. But before she goes on this Merv Griffin performance, they're saying, "Oh, well, they got to do something with her hair. They got to have her in dresses and everything." They basically getting on her really about the way she looks, and it's a touchstone, and it's an event that would later lead to a lot of conflict in Whitney's career, and it's about image. You know what I mean? Her mom and dad had in their eyes, and the record company had in their eyes the image that they wanted Whitney to project to the world, and it wasn't the type of image that she wanted to project to other people. It wasn't who she really was. They wanted her to be in these glamorous dresses, and just an aside, that's really all we knew Whitney for, as she puts it later on in the movie, America's first non-threatening black female artist. Because before that, black female artists in the '60s and the '70s, other than Diana Ross, were uh, not really glamorous beauty queens, not the singers. Um, in the movie industry, Dorothy Dandridge and um, Della Reese and those and Lena Horne, yeah, those were the type of African American beauty queens that we saw before. But that wasn't in the music business. In the music business, especially in the era before Whitney, it was different. You had the Aretha Franklins of the world, you had the Diana Warwicks of the world, and stuff. You did not to say that they weren't um, beautiful women, but beauty wasn't their selling point. And if you did have a lot of beautiful women in the music business, even among white Caucasian musical artists, they were not glamorous. You know what I mean? Music artists at that time, because of turn that music had taken in the 50s and 60s, didn't emphasize the glamour of women. Even the artists that Clyde Davis had previously worked with, like Janis Joplin, Janis wasn't a beauty queen. She was a semi good musician in the rock world, but she wasn't necessarily a beauty queen. Whitney was going to change the mold in terms of R&B artists. She was coming into a new era. We were coming into the 80s. Really, the first era, really, I say the 80s, was the first era of musical integration. Post integration, post the racial turmoil of the 60s and 70s. So she was going to symbolize something different in America's consciousness. And that's just the kind of thing that Clyde Davis wanted to do with her. Clyde Davis, um, the first single that she picked out, How Will I Know, was a very popish single. It was right along the lines of uh, singers at that time, white singers like Cyndi Lauper, Madonna, and others like that, even in the aesthetics, even in the look. Um, Curly blonde wig, you know, they use certain camera angles and certain lighting to make Whitney appear more light skinned and basically a a mainstream pop artist rather than in the R&B realm because they wanted her to as they always say in the music business. This is something they always label, they always say, they always use when an artist becomes to a certain level of success. They say that the individual transcended race, quote unquote. We hear it now, just not with the music business, with celebrities too. Other movie celebrities like Dwayne Johnson say, "Oh, he transcended race." But when they say that, what that means to say is that they want to market them as, yes, we know they're African American. Obviously, we can tell by looking at them, but they want to market them as not just appealing particularly to a black aesthetic. They want to market them as non-racial, non-threatening. Uh, and that's just the way they wanted to market Whitney, and that's how they did it. And even Robin, she was basically mocking it. She was basically saying, "This is the look you're going for," and Whitney was like, "Yeah, this is the look they want, and I'm gonna give it to them. I'm gonna be America's black girl next door, basically." Well, this kind of attitude backfires on Whitney later on. But prior to that, um, Whitney, like I said, is living with Robin, and she wants Robin to be her personal assistant and travel with her on the road. So she asks Robin to be her personal assistant. Robin, her and Robin are joking around, saying, "You can't afford me." And she's saying, "Well, I'm gonna need somebody to get me up at 1 in the morning." She said, "If you say it's 1 in the morning, then you really do need a personal assistant because by the time it's one, it's past. Uh, it's, I mean, it's already the middle of the night. So basically, you're bad with time management. You know what I mean?" But they were just joking around. So she said, "Do you tell your mother? Your mother's gonna hate it because Whitney again before." She was forced to conform with the standards of the mainstream pop world and to deal with the ethno-racial politics of uh, society. She was forced to conform to what her parents wanted. You know, was she not obedient enough? Was she not fearful enough? Which is that she says to this radio announcer later on. She comes from a religious background, so obviously, like we talked about in other videos and um, uh, in the context of other things, homosexuality, being lesbian, being gay, is not something that jives with the ultra conservative religious background of the daughter of a famous gospel singer. You know, it just doesn't go together, and it definitely doesn't go together in an environment like the 1980s that was, let's face it, rife with homophobia. In the 1980s, um, it wasn't like it is today, where gay people are accepted and gay people, are in a better place socially, where an artist can be open about their sexuality. If a person was bisexual, like Whitney was, or in a gay relationship, they can't be open and honest about it, especially not if you're trying to present them as America's girl next door. That doesn't jive either. You know what I mean? So you have both these conflicting type images, things that the public wanted from Whitney and things that her family wanted from her, but nothing to take into consideration with the things that she herself wanted. So Robin asked her that, and she says, "No, but I'll go to my dad." And she goes to her dad, and when she walks into the office of her dad's office, her dad is with a secretary, and this secretary tries to be nice to Whitney. She tries to ingratiate herself with Whitney. She calls her by her nickname, Nippy, which obviously Whitney doesn't like. The looks that Whitney, if looks could kill with this lady, the looks that she gave her was like, "Damn, bitch, you better step off calling me my nickname." But the dad, who we think we are, this is the first time in the movie that we get a look at how sinister I think John Huston really was. We think, okay, the dad's gonna, and yeah, he's cheating on his wife. That's a key right there. But we think that he's going to say, yeah, Whitney, be yourself, do what you want to do. He doesn't say that at all. He says he wants her to be seen with young men, seen with young men. He reiterates that several times to her and Robin. Robin's just like, you know what? Well, I'm not doing that. I'm not your daughter. You can't tell me what to do. But Whitney, in her mindset that she was taught from an early age to be obedient, be in the Christian church, be the daughter of a gospel singer, be, go along with the flow of what people are saying. She gives into that pressure and she agrees to that. She doesn't fight back on that. It's interesting because in certain instances with Whitney, she was upfront and she was very forceful in the things that she wanted. Like I said, flirting with and later flirting with Bobby Brown and flirting. She was forceful when it came to things like that, but when it came to stepping up to her family and being herself and being self-assertive with that, she really wasn't at all. So her dad just basically says, "Look, you have to." He tells Robin, "You have no experience as a personal assistant," but basically saying they can't be together and they have to break up immediately. So, being that she signed to Arista Records, she does a musical collaboration with Jermaine Jackson, and it was during this musical collaboration with Jermaine Jackson that the guy who was the record engineer behind the board, he says, "Wow, there's a lot of chemistry between her and Jermaine." And Clive already knows. One thing about Clive Davis, at least in this movie, is that he's very perceptive. He can tell a lot of things. He can tell, like I said, when Whitney was sipping the wine over zealously, that she, That's a clue in right there. That's foreshadowing. Story construction and foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing that she will later have a problem with substance abuse in his eyes. He can already tell that. And one thing too, he can already tell about is the closeness between her and Robin. So he tells the record engineer, listen, pay attention to your boards. Don't pay attention to what's going on with Jermaine and Whitney. But it ends up that Jermaine and Whitney do have an affair, and Robin finds out about it because Whitney confesses it. And it's this scene that is really one of my favorite scenes, and it's really intense because it really reveals the inner conflict between not only Whitney trying to do what other people wanted to do, like with the scene with her father in his office, but also the inner conflict of Whitney herself, because these kind of religious views lead to internalized homophobia with people. Not only do they want to perform heterosexuality for the public like she did, or for their family like she did, but also she herself was frustrated with her desires and her love for Robin. Robin tears up everything, and Whitney just goes to grab the tub of ice cream. But one thing she says to her is that she wants a family. Family and faith are important to her, and that she doesn't want to go to hell. But Robin is hurt by this. Robin feels rejected because, and the look on, and shout out to Professor Williams that she did an awesome job portraying the anguish on Robin's face when he tells her this, because it's like, you want that, but that's the one thing I can't give to you. And they go to the couch, and Whitney grabs Robin by the hand, and you can see the turmoil on Robin's face because, guys, one of the things that's hardest to accept is to just be a friend to someone that you really care deeply for, to just be in that friend type role, to just be in that subordinate position. And that's what Robin really has to accept. It might not be Jermaine, and it most likely wouldn't have been Jermaine because Jermaine, of course, was still married to Hazel Gordy at the time. He was cheating on his wife at the time anyway, but it was going to be somebody else inevitably, and it was going to be a man. You know, Robin just had to put it aside, and she remains Whitney's manager and friend, but they have to just resign to friendship. And she says to her the line, um, from perpetuity throughout the universe, basically telling her, uh, that she loves her forever, even though they can't be together because of the way things are. So from there, Whitney is attending the 1988 Soul Train Awards, and it's here because of the radio interview that she did earlier, where this radio DJ asked her straight out, "Do you feel like you're a sellout? A lot of people say that you are a sellout, that your music isn't black enough, that you're ashamed to be black because of the image, again, that Clyde Davis had concocted for her. Clyde Davis experienced working with quote unquote white musicians, no really experience working with any previous black musicians, had concocted for her this mainstream pop princess image that didn't really confirm to the cultural trends in black R&B music at the time, because what was popular at the time in black R&B music was kind of quiet storm type stuff that Anita Baker was putting out, but also it was going more into hip hop. That was starting. That was 1988, so hip hop was just starting to speed up. Um, Later producers that she later worked with on later albums to change that image was like L.A. Reid and Babyface. They were developing this new sound. It wasn't really New Jack Swing kind of yet. Teddy Riley and Andre Harrell hadn't really put their fingers in it quite yet, but it was getting there. there, and Whitney's sound just wasn't that. You know what I mean? And when she's walking into the Soul Train Awards, you can see Fat Al Sharpton in his tracksuit protesting her. So this is when Al was heavy. This was in New York, and at this time, racial tension in New York in 1988, 89, because of incidents like the Yusuf Hawkins. I mean, not the Yusuf Hawkins beating, the Howard Beach incident, and other incidents like the Central Park Five. Racial tensions were really high, and they felt like Whitney wasn't really representing the black community all that much or speaking out on any kind of black issues, which she really wasn't because that wasn't her image. But she goes to this award show, and when they announced for her song, "I Want to Dance with Somebody," which she basically made with Robin in mind, because when Clyde told her about it, she was like, "Imagine this song that you want to dance with somebody, but you really can't. You're prohibited basically from dancing with this person because of societal pressures." So this song was really special to her, and it really meant something to her, relating to her personal experience. But what do the people do here? They boo this song. You know what I mean? Anita Baker comes out. Uh, she presents the award, and you know Whitney's name comes up as a nominee, and they boo this song right out the building, and Janet Jackson wins. That's uh, I think it was for Control with Janet, and that's really saying something because Janet was again switching over and getting out of the pop realm, going into a blacker sound, and Whitney really wasn't. So before, when she had first come into the building that night, Bobby Brown was performing My Prerogative, and she was kind of enamored with Bobby. She was hitting him in the back of the head with her pocketbook, again being really forward and flirting. So because of them booing her off that stage that night, that gave her the gusto to really give Bobby Brown her phone number. Bobby Brown here is played by Ashton Sanders, who of course played in such movies as Equalizer 2, Moonlight, and Wu Tang American Saga. Really great actor. I love his work, and he really captures Bobby Brown's kind of rebelliousness. And again, Bobby, if anything, in the late 1980s, he was leading the way with his sound into the New Jack Swing era, kind of bringing that rough exterior. He had just left New Edition, and he was bringing that rough hip hop exterior into the R&B world. Kind of one of those guys like Bill DeVoe and Michael Bivins, and that kind of first New Jack Swing era. So if she wanted to hook up with anybody that was quote unquote more blacker, you know, more culturally in tune, it was Bobby Brown that she was going to hook up with. And plus, he's a guy, so any rumors of her being gay was out the window there because he's a guy. So not only is he a guy, but it's advantageous because he's he's ingratiated and he's beloved by the black music world. And he was really on the ascendancy at that time. People thought that he was going to be the next big thing in R&B, that he was going to be basically on mainstream R&B's answer to uh, Michael Jackson, who kind of left the R&B world and kind of shifted completely to the pop and rock world by his second album. They thought Bobby was going to be that next voice, that next big, pardon the pun, next big star. Because at that time, if you'd have had your prophetic glasses on, you'd have thought that too. And Whitney kind of knew where things were headed when it came to that. So they start their relationship and they end up dating. And Sissy Houston gives her nodding approval when Whitney gives the number. And it's not long before they're in the back of the car making out. And all of a sudden, Bobby Brown just pops out and says, "Will you marry me?" Now, what he doesn't tell Whitney is that he got his ex girlfriend pregnant. He tells her after he proposed because I think he kind of knew that if he just said it before, Whitney would of course said no. Now, Whitney, she had trouble standing up to certain people, but she never ever had trouble with standing up to Bobby Brown. And at this point, she loses it in the middle of traffic. I think I don't know what city they're in, but I assume it's NYC. And they're in the middle of traffic. Here's one of the two of the most famous singers in all of entertainment, and here they are arguing in the middle of the highway, and nobody seems to notice it except one lone voice that yells out, "Hey, Whitney!" And what does Bobby say to her to soothe her down? He says, "I know you. I understand you. We are both from the hood." And that kind of smooths Whitney over. That kind of gives her the kind of validation that she really wants. Because I think all throughout Whitney's life, she wanted to be not seen as that preppy Catholic schoolgirl. She wanted to kind of seem hood, like, you know what I mean? She wanted to seem like she had an edge to her and she had some street to her, even though she really didn't. You know what I mean? She wanted to distance herself from that goody two shoes image. And getting with Bobby Brown was another way to do that. So when Bobby gives her that validation, and when Bobby finally says, "Yeah, you're from the hood," and that that makes her happy. You know what I mean? And that makes her accept his proposal. So now, before she gives um, the news to Robin, which of course is going to crush Robin even further, Robin herself has news that Whitney, this is 1991, Whitney has, in the midst of the first Persian Gulf War, stopping the invasion of Saddam Hussein, the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein, Whitney has the chance to sing at the Super Bowl, national anthem. And of course, that news overshadows the news of Bobby and Whitney getting engaged. But that's one of the things that really showed, in my opinion, how Robin really loved her. Because here you're getting Whitney one of the biggest gigs that you can get her. The Super Bowl is, like the Lisa and I talked about before in this channel, is watched by basically everyone. When the Super Bowl, one of those things, we have very few things in our culture. We had more back then, but very few things in our culture as Americans, other than holidays, that people really come together, of people of all races, which is what something that they show in the scene in the movie. They show Asian people watching it, Hispanic people watching it, Black people watching it, the troops overseas watching it, and especially at wartime, they show the jets flying over with the red, white, and blue mist. Everybody's watching it, so it's one of those ritualistic events that's special in the American consciousness that it really pulls Americans of all races all together. So Robin was really smart, but for doing this, because the way that Whitney blew this performance out of the water, um, with with her own style, wearing a tracksuit. They initially offer her a dress, this blue dress, and she doesn't want to put on a blue dress. She says, "I'm gonna finally be me for once," and she comes out in the famous white tracksuit. And the way she sings this song is the best performance ever that anybody has ever done with the national anthem. This national anthem, this rendition of the national anthem, actually went on uh, on sale as like it was an actual single from one of her albums. And this is one of the hardest songs to sing because this song was not initially a song. It was comprised, during the War of 1812 by Francis Scott Key as a sign of our resilience. We didn't actually win that war, but as the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, our flag was still there. So even though we didn't defeat the British again, the British did not defeat us. and it was our second American Revolution. Well, this was kind of an American Revolution for Whitney as well because she she then reconciled, I think, with the black community here. Um, the black community that wasn't accepting her, that booed her out of the building, and the Soul Train Award was finally coming to accept her. Americans of all races were coming to accept her because she was so phenomenal. She was so, I mean, Bobby Brown was jumping up for joy in his living room. Robin was jumping up for joy. Hell, Sissy Houston from her couch in a cast was still conducting the musical performance from her couch. Nobody, nobody ever did it like Whitney did it with that song, as hard as that song is. And that's, of course, one of the most iconic performances. Lisa and I was well, Lisa knew right away that it was not Naomi Aki's voice that was being used in this, that it was Whitney's voice. But I think Lisa had said that Naomi Aki's voice was used in other performances, like the first performance, "The Greatest Love of All." So Whitney here is basically blown up. And one night, after she had the first fight with Bobby, she's watching TV, and she decides that she wants to be in a movie. So uh, in the middle of the night, she calls up Clyde Davis and she says, "Clyde, I want to be in a movie." And Clyde's a record producer, but I'm sure he has pull in Hollywood as well. But he's like, "What? Why?" And then he's like, "Okay, we'll get you in a movie." So it's not long after that he offers her The Bodyguard. And initially she turns it down uh, because she's like, "Well, I'm just gonna play a singer. It's not really out of my range." She doesn't really say that, but the look on it and the expression on her face indicate that she believes that. But she says, "Who's my body? A singer in a relationship with her bodyguard. Who's my bodyguard?" Kevin Costner. And Kevin Costner, for the early '90s, was one of the two uh, top leading men in all of Hollywood. Yeah, I mean, him and probably Mel Gibson. You know what I mean? So she's like, "All right, yeah." And one thing Clyde Davis says to her, "He wants you." And she's like, "But what do you mean he wants me?" And obviously he wants her for the movie, but she took it initially as he wants her, like wants her. Lisa was saying that it would have been funnier if Clyde Davis would have paused it and been like, "Yeah, for the movie." And that was true. At Whitney's funeral, um, Kevin Costner talks about how initially, you guys know, they wanted, some of you do that know the background of the bodyguard. Initially, they wanted Barbara Streisand to play the role, but Kevin Costner, he pushed for Whitney, and there was pushback for that because it was 1992. And 1992, just like 1988 was, the whole late 80s, early 90s, really racially charged years, but 1992 especially because of the LA riots, and there was still a lot of racism and interracial relationships on camera and TV was something really different. And Hollywood didn't think, well, they never think that anybody's ready for anything until it's done. But Kevin Costner, he pushed for it, and Whitney got the role. But the stress of the bodyguard and the stress of her first feature film caused her to have a miscarriage. They actually got one of the things that was cool about this is they actually got archival footage of Kevin Costner in the bodyguard to show in the movie. But that one scene where Whitney's looking out the window, uh, they say, "What's going on, Whitney?" And then she suffers a miscarriage in this. You know what I mean? And Bobby is, of course, at her bedside. And he's telling her, "We'll have tons of kids. You know, we'll move on from this." And she's indicating at that time that the pressure is a little bit too much. As a matter of fact, the first time that they show her snorting cocaine, is when she asked Clyde for that role. That was one of the things that kept her up in the middle of the night, just saying weird shit, and that's what she came to a premonition of. You know what I mean? From bouts of being high on cocaine. You know, but from there, the movie is a success. Obviously, the soundtrack is a success, and it shows in the scene where Clyde Davis introduces her to the song "I Will Always Love You." That's another thing that Kevin Costner pushed for. Kevin Costner is probably one of the most countryest guys ever, as we can see by his renaissance, his comeback right now with the Peacock series Yellowstone. And before that, the year before he made The Bodyguard, he made Dances with Wolves. He's like a big country guy, so he's a big country fan aficionado. And of course, when you're a country fan, you would be a fan of Dolly Parton music. So he knew about the song "I Will Always Love You," the 1978 rendition of Dolly Parton's song, and he gave it to Clyde Davis, and Clyde Davis played it for Whitney, and Whitney just loved it, and Whitney made it her own, basically because it was so reminiscent of what she was really going through, the person that she would always love. Listen to the lyrics, guys, if you don't know the lyrics, but you probably should. It's one of the biggest songs ever made in history. Um, it's about a person who wants to love somebody but can't for whatever reason. Within the context of The Bodyguard, it has to do with Kevin Costner being her bodyguard and her being an artist and it being unethical and kind of slightly racial overtones. But in the context of Whitney's life, it has a lot of gay overtones. She wanted to love Robin but couldn't. You know what I mean? It's a really sad song. But during this, in the movie "I Want to Dance with Somebody," they're actually showing Whitney getting married to Bobby Brown, and the sadness on Robin's face. Whitney looked like an angel in this dress, really traditional. She had the cap on and everything, coming out in the big train, and her parents kind of looked relieved. I mean, at least she's getting married to a guy. Now her image is all cleaned up. No more of those gay rumors, because her and Robin were always out going here, going there, gallivanting, going on her brother's yacht. She was never really seen with any guys really much publicly other than the brief affair with Jermaine Jackson. So now they're saying, at least she's with Bobby. He's in the picture and he's doing, and she's quote unquote doing the right thing. Little did they know that Bobby's energy and her energy put together, even though he didn't get her started on the drugs, it wouldn't lead her down the good road, and she would eventually push Robin out of the picture and put Bobby Brown more front and center, especially after they had Bobby Chris. And Bobby would eventually start cheating. Right after they had Bobby Chris, um, there's this scene where Whitney's telling the 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 pilot on her private jet that she wants to go home early so she could spend time with her daughter and her husband. So she goes home early from the tour. She goes in the room, and what does she see? The nanny is asleep, and Bobby Chris is asleep, and Bobby's not. Bobby Brown is not there. She goes to look at her credit card bills, and Bobby Brown's been spending it all on, nights out with other women. And it's here when we first see her smoking crack, you um, with the pipe, and she gets so high in this one, because previously she had just, she had done snorting cocaine, but never the smoking. And after she does this, she cleans up the entire mansion, guys. She's cleaning it up frantically, waiting for Bobby Brown to come home. And he comes home and he's drunk. You know what I mean? And she confronts him about the cheating, and he says, "Remember, you're married to me, Miss Brown. Don't ever disrespect me." And the fact that he said Miss Brown is an indicator of what I always said. When I said this in the review about the Ricardos, I said this in the review other videos that we've done about other famous couples like Jay-Z and Beyonce. And I said this earlier in this review about Whitney's parents, that Bobby's success was here now. Whitney was here. She was a movie star. She had done the Super Bowl performance. They weren't on the same level anymore. Bobby had fallen off. Whitney was here. Bobby was here, and he was kind of feeling some way. So he was kind of reasserting his manhood, if you will, by basically threatening Whitney physically. But Whitney didn't back down from him. Whitney said she would get she would get a gun and everything. She didn't seem really intimidated by him at all. It wasn't like she was the type of abused woman that cowered in the corner, all scared and everything. Uh, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case at all. Not when it came to him. She was she was confrontational. She got in his face. She told him how she really felt. Um, but they continue on with their relationship, and she continues on with the drugs. And as she gets deeper into her movie career and starts moving away from her musical career, her musical career starts to then falter. She moves deeper into the drugs, like I said, and deeper into the movie career, and the music career just falls behind. She starts to do other movies like The Preacher's Wife, Waiting to Exhale, and even the Cinderella movie. And she also starts to look at her bank account, and her bank account isn't really reflecting her success on a in a major way. Her bank account is really going down, and what she's starting to notice is that her dad, who was in charge of her finances, is the one really taking uh, real advantage of her because initially her dad was giving out credit cards and giving out private jets to everyone, and just especially all the female secretaries. There's this one scene where he's walking into the office to giving out, you know, credit cards like they're candy. You know what I mean? To every basically every secretary, and it starts to really pile up. And Whitney starts to notice the books, and she goes into the hotel room where her dad's smoking cigarettes. I mean, smoking cigars rather, with a bunch of executives from Arista trying to negotiate this $100 million deal for her. And she tells them, "Listen, uh, you you've been giving away my money. You know what I mean? You've been stealing from me, basically." And he tries to deny it, but the records don't match with his testimony. So, and it's funny because as she's going in the lobby yelling at one of these record executives, the record executive says, "Yeah, my daughter loved you in Cinderella." So this is probably around like 96. I mean, 97, 98 when she did the movie Cinderella. It's really awkward, but it's kind of funny. Kind of added some levity to a scene that was really brutal. But rather than get another manager, she continues on with her dad as her manager, and the stress is really starting to get to her, and the relationship problems with Bobby are really starting to get to her. And there's this one scene with her and Clyde Davis in the office where she's saying to Clyde, I want to go out there and continue to tour and continue to do music, but one you know one of the things I get and one of the things I understand is years ago in the 80s when before her relationship problems, Clyde had offered her a song "Why Does It Hurt So Bad," and she initially turned it down, saying to it, and it would never be her. But um, as she gets older, she understands what that really means because life is really taking a turn for her. And I think this was the movie kind of jumps around a lot, really in the timeline. Especially if you're a real Whitney Houston fan, the timelines really don't match up because "Why Does It Hurt So Bad" came out on the soundtrack of "Waiting to Exhale." Um, when she finally did this song, and another thing she says in the same scene is that uh, she has regrets because Bobby Chris sees everything. She's taking Bobby Chris on tour and she sees everything. And by seeing everything, quote unquote, what it means is that she sees Bobby Brown's infidelity, the drug stuff, and a lot of the drug issues as well. And she says, I play the fairy godmother and princesses to girls in movies, like we talked about in the Cinderella movie. Now it's an inspiration for young African American girls, but really, I don't have the time to attend to my own princess at home, and that's what I wish I had the time to do, is attend to my own princess at home. And the theme of being a princess is really hammered home because when her dad wants to really quiet her down in several scenes in the movie, he hammers home to her, "You are a princess. You are a princess." So she wishes that she had more time alone with her daughter and time to spend with her daughter rather than being out here portraying fairy godmothers and princesses. That she was more attentive to her family. But unfortunately, it's the pitfalls of fame. But again, her career at this time is starting to falter. And then that's when one of the funniest scenes come up when in the middle of the night again, waking him out of his bed, she goes to Clyde Davison's room. She says, "Clyde, I want to know if you got one." And he goes, "Got got some, got one. What do you mean?" And he's like he's hoping that she ain't saying anything about drugs or alcohol, but obviously she's already high at this point because she's hopping on the sofa. She's taking another page out of Tom Cruise's book. This time, the time that Tom Cruise hopped on Oprah's sofa, but Cruise hadn't done it yet. But basically, she's hopping on Clive's sofa, dancing around, and that's when he plays for her the song "It's Not Right, but It's Okay," and they show the video for "It's Not Right, and It's Okay." And that was sort of like a mini comeback for Whitney. That was a sort of mini renaissance, a more modern approach to music. I know at that time she worked a lot with Wyclef Jean, and he was really hot with the Fugees. So, and she did a Heartbreak Hotel song with Kelly Price and Faith Evans, which they don't show. But and she was played a little bit on hip hop radio at that time. And but again, her music career starts to really falter and suffer. But to pay off these debts, she got to go on another world tour. And then she says to Clyde, "Daddy says I can do another world tour." And he goes, "Yeah, but Daddy is wrong. You can't handle the pressure, Whitney," because he could see that she was sliding down pretty fast. And she gives him a quote from the book of Matthew, and then he says, "Remember, don't fall on your tuchus," and that's from the book of Clyde. And she goes, "Oh, what do you know, Clive? You're Jewish. You don't know anything about the gospel." And he goes, "Yeah, so was Jesus on his mother's side." So that's a pretty funny scene. But again, uh, she does do this tour, and on this tour, this is the time when you start to really see in her performances the drugs take a hold of her. Her sweating profusely, appearing pretty skinny, rail thin. Um, just really a bad situation. I think this was also, again, like I said, the movie jumps around a lot. So I think this was also around the 2001 performance that she had done at the Michael Jackson thing in Madison Square Garden, because this is an indication of the Madison Square Garden performance. Now, in that movie, this bad performance is made to be juxtaposed to one of the better performances that she does in the movie earlier at Nelson Mandela's inauguration when he became the president of South Africa, and and that was one of the things I think too that helped ingratiate her to the black community because the South African struggle against apartheid was one of the main causes of the African American community at that time. And by making friends with Nelson Mandela, a prisoner of protest for 27 years in South Africa, and doing that performance in African garb, looking the way she did. But this bad performance that she does at Madison Square Garden for the Michael Jackson thing is made to juxtapose to the great performances that she had done earlier in the movie, especially that one, because based on the crowd reactions in both scenes. And she, she she's just not getting help. And then finally, even Clyde Davis, who never steps in, has to step in. At this time, she's fired. She's fired Robin. The scene where she fires Robin is one of the funnier scenes because Bobby says, Nip says she don't want to see nobody. And then Robin goes, yeah, but I'm not nobody. But Whitney is made to choose. Once again, throughout most of the movie, she is torn. You could see her being torn between Bobby Brown and between Robin. Bobby Brown and Robin, her best friend and her husband. She feels this kind of loyalty again because of her Christian upbringing to uh, to be submissive to her husband, to be obedient to her husband as the Bible proclaims that it should be, while at the same time loyalty to her best friend. But she chooses ultimately Bobby Brown, and they kind of shove Robin out of the picture, and Whitney becomes worse and worse to a point where uh, Bobby Brown and Robin really get into this physical, I mean, almost this practically this physical altercation between the two. I mean, where Bobby's like, I got it under control. I got it under control. And she's like, really? You got it under control, Bobby, by doing this? And Whitney, at this point, is terrible. Like, terrible. The drugs have really gotten a hold of her at this point. Like I said, to the point where Clyde Davis has to step in and say, look, Whitney, I've seen this before. I've seen it with Judy Garland. I've seen it with Janis Joplin. I don't want you to go down this road. You need to go to rehab. And she tells him, listen, sometimes I need a ladder. Basically insinuating that I need help to be the kind of performer that I am. He says, look, you don't need help. You didn't need a ladder when I first met you. You were completely clean and you didn't need any help then. And you don't need any help now, but you need help getting off these drugs. You don't need help. You don't need to be intoxicated or high to go on stage. You know, you need to get a handle on this situation. You know, and get a hold of it. She doesn't listen. She says no. She's not going to rehab. And it's not till after her dad dies when she confronts her dad about the money that he's stolen. And from his deathbed, by the way, her dad is still demanding his cut. He's laying on his deathbed, almost dying, and he's demanding his cut from her contract. He's revealed to be greedy. I mean, really greedy. And but her dad's death pushes her over the edge to the point where Sissy finds her in the attic and has her arrested and taken to rehab. They had to actually force her to go to the rehab. She goes to the rehab. She gets herself better, and that's when in 2009 she does the Oprah performance, and that was basically her comeback with "I Look to You." She thanked everybody. You know, Oprah, they actually showed real footage of Oprah in the movie, so God knows they had to pay an arm and a leg for Oprah's appearance just in that one little scene. But she makes her comeback, and but at this point, this is 2009, and the world has completely moved on from her in music. You know, she's had her confrontation with Diane Sawyer. She's had her confrontations with Wendy Williams. She's had her drug use is publicly known, but they don't show what the Wendy Williams thing, and they don't show um, the Diane Sawyer interview, which both women too, Diane Sawyer and Whitney Williams, have struggled with addiction. You know what I mean? Diane with alcoholism, Wendy with the actual same drug that Whitney was struggling with, crack, crack and cocaine. So, I mean, they're in no position to talk. But the press is really getting on her about her issues. It's gotten to a boiling point now. You know what I mean? And they talk after her comeback. The fans were walking out in a performance in Denmark in '09. So this is really affecting Whitney's ego. She feels like she's lost a step. So she decides to perform at this Grammy party. Fast forward to 2012 at the pre-Grammy party to basically launch her come back again in front of the music and entertainment industry. And unfortunately, because of the way the fans were reacting to it, and because of what the scene of this one white guy did, the exact same white guy who years ago clamored for her autograph, now he, he got her autograph and he threw it in the trash, and Whitney saw it, and that caused that was a blast to her self-esteem. That was a blast to her ego, basically, and she relapsed into drugs, and that's when she passed away. But right before she went downstairs to get some honey, as she told her daughter, she said that phrase, "From perpetuity throughout the universe," to her daughter last. And that's when they flash back to the 1994 AMAs, and she's doing the performance again, and they ran the credits and they ran the real photos of her, and that was the end of it. And that was when he's passing. But right before that, right before she had went down, she had this interaction with this bartender, and the bartender reminds her of that same performance that she had done years ago. And she says, "Oh, that was 18 years ago." And it just, I think, confirmed in her mind that, um, it was so long ago. But like Lisa said, it was ironic that when she was up, the white community was loving her, and that same white guy was asking for her autograph. But when she was down, it was the white community that turned on her, and it was the black community that uplifted her and supported her, much like a lot of other uh, um, other black celebrities like OJ, Michael Jackson, some of these other black celebrities that people deem as sellouts. They eventually, uh, when they fall down, it's mainstream media, and particularly the Caucasian media. Not always just the Caucasian media. You got, of course, people that are negative of all races and people that are positive of all races. But you know, just as much as they just as much as they love you, they love to tear you down as well. They love to build you up and tear you down. So that happens a lot. But it was this black bartender that stood in her corner, and this white guy. It was just symbolic. I think it's not really a racial issue, but it's something that really struck out, that Lisa had brought up before, and that really struck out to me. And she gave him $100 tip, so that's a pretty good night for a bartender, for real. Um, but yeah, it's just a really sad story of her life. She was such a talented performer. Uh, and I give this movie a 6 out of 7. Man, it was a really good movie. Um, Naomi Aki, of course, stole the show. She has a great voice in her own right. Obviously, I think she had um, some musical training. I know she's worked on Othello. She's British, um, so those those black British artists, and they blow it out the actors rather. They blow it out the water. Idris Elba, Delroy Lindo, all these. What I wish they would have shown Lisa, the what I take away points from is they didn't show the Whitney Williams thing. I think the Whitney Williams thing is one of the biggest things that people remember from Whitney. And I think also the Diane Sawyer interview. The Diane Sawyer interview was in 2002. Um, in that interview was, other than the Michael Jackson thing, other than that, that was one of the interviews that people that weren't diehard Whitney fans finally said, wait a minute, something is up with Whitney. You know what I mean? She's never been this combative. She's never been this nervous. Nervous. She's never been this. I mean, she's always been quick witted. She's always been had quick comebacks. That's why her name is Nippy. You know what I mean? But she's never been this defensive. You know, it's one of those interviews that's like, wait a minute, something's up. You know what I mean? People might have not known what, but something was really up. And unfortunately, it was a huge part of her legacy. Now, so yeah, that's your answer to your question, Lisa, that I feel like I wish they would have shown. I wish they would have shed more light on is that incident because that's a benchmark incident in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's like doing a Michael Jackson movie and not showing the Martin Bashir documentary, right? Or doing a movie on Princess Diana and not showing the Martin Bashir interview or any of the more famous, breakdown interviews. Because when we were doing a movie on Mariah Carey and never showing the TRL breakdown that she had, or even the drunken performance at the New Year's Eve celebration that one year, right? Or doing a movie about Britney Spears and not showing that time when she shaved her head bald, or that one performance at the VMAs when she could barely perform. You know, unfortunately, if you're going to show the good with the bad, you have to show all the bad. You know, they showed the skinny performance. They didn't indicate what performance it was specifically, but they showed that. But I think the interview and how our interaction with the press, Wendy Williams and Diane Sawyer would have changed over time as she was more compliant with the press in the beginning, juxtaposed to how she became more combative with the press later on. So I think that's one of the things they missed out. Other than that, maybe her giving birth. We don't know what was on the director's cut in this. Um, as far as my opinion of Clyde Davis, we talked about this in the video that was copyrighted and removed, at least in the previous video. I feel like Clyde Davis was more of a father figure than actually John Huston was for Whitney, and he was always kind of there. But at the same time, I feel like Lisa brought this up in the comment section before that she felt like Clyde Davis was kind of pushing Whitney at the Grammy, on the pre-Grammy party, kind of pushing her out there carelessly because she had really fallen behind, and he was kind of pushing her out there. And I kind of felt one of the things that I had against Clive in this movie was, yeah, you had a policy of you never stepped in with your artist, but come on, you could have a policy of staying out of your artist's business, but at the same time, when your artist, when you see, he saw that this was a problem for many years and he did nothing about it. So he could have stepped in sooner, even though that was against his policy. So what? It was a rule you made. It's a rule you can break. You know what I mean? But compared to other record company people, he was more. He had a more of a paternalistic nature, and he had Whitney's best interest at heart. Compared to when you compare him to like Pebbles, with TLC, you know what I mean? But when you compare him to somebody that actually cared, I don't know how much he actually really cared about Whitney. I mean, yeah, he was a producer in the movie, so it's gonna paint him in the best light possible, right? But uh, you know, anyway, at least that's pretty much it. But all I gotta say, anything you want to add? Like son? What do you mean, like son? Son the tabloid, the UK paper. Oh, you wish okay when it came out around the B day. Um, yeah, yeah, that would have been nice. I mean, in a movie like this, that um is not a blockbuster or is not a franchise movie or a tentpole type movie, is gonna struggle when you released it. They released it on December 23rd. When you release it, it's gonna struggle really in the box office because it's not a tentpole movie, and also because the timing of it prevented it from achieving any Oscars, receiving any Oscar awards. You know what I mean? It has to compete with a lot of these Oscar bait movies like The Whale. You know that they're Oscar bait. They fish for Oscars. And biopic, yeah, exactly. Lisa's absolutely right. She says because it came out around Christmas and it came close. That's what I'm saying. Christmas, summertime, this is not good. It's not a good time to release a movie like this because this kind of movie that is a biopic movie and is a serious adult content type movie has to deal with these franchise movies like, well, I don't know any franchise movies that came out around this Christmas, but you know these kind of movies that are popcorn movies. You know what I mean? That everybody seems to love, like Marvel MCU type shit. Oh, yeah, Avatar. Yeah. Again, franchise movies that are different kinds of fare. You know that this movie doesn't really attract a younger audience, more people that grew up on Whitney's music that kids don't really know about. You know, maybe they know about it through their parents, but I will say this: compared to the 2015 version, that Lifetime release, that was a piece of garbage. Which that version being a piece of garbage, this was way better. That version being a piece of garbage was really surprising to me because one of the producers on that version was Angela Bassett, and Angela Bassett worked close with Whitney. They was friends. They did it way exhale together. So that was interesting. Uh, that she wasn't accurate at all. Man. She was totally inaccurate when it came to her. But then again, it's Lifetime. Lifetime movies are basically movies that people put on to either fall asleep or make out to anyway. So like they're really, I mean, some Lifetime movies are good, you know what I mean? But they're not big budget movies. This was a big budget release, but like Lisa said, timing may prevent it from making a lot of money. But think about it. We know from DVDs or video sales, a movie doesn't have to make a lot of money necessarily to be considered a good. Some of the movies that make a lot of money later on, people say, well, those were just movies that made a lot of money at the time because of special effects. A lot of those special effects type films, yeah, Louis. But when special effects type films uh, they aren't that good necessarily anyway. Really, you know what I mean? They're just for the special effects, not necessarily for the story. But Lisa saying Lifetime movies are not really good. Yeah, because whenever you Lifetime is sort of like Spike, Lisa. Whenever you make a network geared to a certain gender, right? And the network puts out what they think that gender wants to know about, they'll put out anything cheap just so that uh, people watch it. You know what I mean? So Spike was like that, and Spike always put out action movies, and Lifetime specializes in say romantic movies, and movies that appeal to women. But Whitney was a woman, yeah, that's true. But her story is universal. Addiction is something that men and women struggle with. So it doesn't really it didn't really fit the mold of what Lifetime comes out with. I've probably seen a handful of Lifetime movies in my life, mostly movies that I was forced to watch with significant others that I was going out with at the time. You know what I mean? But some of them, Jennifer Beals had one that was really good, called A Wife's Worst Nightmare. But again, that was about relationships. That was about breaking up, infidelity. Uh, that well, it wasn't a biography movie. I think if they were gonna do made for TV, but Whitney was too big anyway for a made for TV type movie. But if they were gonna do it, they probably should have done on A&E because A&E is a more biography centric channel, not Lifetime. Lifetime is television for women. That was the tagline. It's just women movies. But Whitney's story, even though she was a woman, was more universal. She didn't just appeal to women; she appealed to men, people of all races, genders, whatever. You know what I mean? So, um, doesn't really fit that. It's like you're gonna put what are you gonna put Richie Valens La Bamba on freaking Spike TV just because he's a man? No, it doesn't make sense. So yeah, that's true. Yeah, at least that's saying the only reason they did this movie because of the backlash that it got for Lifetime. Well, yeah, Lifetime and going on this binge. Wow, at least it's saying if that Lifetime movie. Well, I don't know about that. Like, Whitney was one of the biggest artists ever. They would eventually made a movie about it, but then you're probably right. I mean, hell, this Elvis movie took years to come out, a definitive big blockbuster release of an Elvis movie. So it probably would have came out eventually, but it would have taken a while. You know what I mean? There were no rush to do it. You know, but because in the Lifetime movie, they had to correct some of the mistakes and some of the backlash from some of the fans, and the whole hologram controversy too, when they wanted to do the Whitney hologram. But yeah, I mean, how Abraham Lincoln's the 16th president of the United States. He's on the money. He's on the $5 bill. right? And they didn't come out with a definitive biography movie about his life until 2012. And the man's been dead since 1865. You know what I mean? So sometimes they do take years. I mean, the only Rush biography movie that ever has come out, I would think, uh, was Selena's biography. Selena died in '95. The biography movie came out in '97. You know, like, so. I mean, look at JFK. There still hasn't been a definitive biography about JFK. The movie that Oliver Stone made in the early '90s, that starred Kevin Costner again, so that's connected to this video in a way. That wasn't about JFK's life. That was about his assassination and the conspiracy theories surrounding therein. It wasn't about his life. So at least it's right. Biography movies take a while to come out. A celebrity could be dead for years and years, and they still. Uh, I've never come. John Lennon has never had a definitive biography movie about his life. You know, James Brown. It didn't take all that long with James Brown, but he didn't have. He died in '06. His movie came out like in 2012. Jackie Robinson, another one, 2012, and he died years ago. So these kind of stuff takes time. Like I said, they probably would have done it eventually, but the Lifetime movie being so shitty, uh, made them pressure. The fans put pressure. Uh, the fans put pressure on them. Uh, but the problem with a television movie is you would think more people would be able to see it because it's free television, but people don't take it. People don't when they see a television movie. People don't take it serious as they would a movie. You know what I mean? And we talked about this in some of my review videos, my decade in review videos, where I talked about the transformation of TV, how TV has become more serious. Before TV was just TV to people is just something that you watch in pastime. A movie is something that you pay for and that you take more seriously. When a film comes out in the movies, a biography movie about somebody's life, people take it serious. Whereas made for TV movies are just that, made for TV movies. You know what I mean? I mean, there have been some that have been good. The TLC movie that came on in VH1 was pretty good. Touched on a lot of their lives. The Salt and Pepper movie, I mean, not the Whitney one. The Wendy Williams movie was all right, but most of the TV movies are not good. The Aaliyah movie is an example, and the Whitney movie from 2015 is an example. But this one is good. I recommend this one. Anybody to go see this one. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe, and hit the bell button to see when my next video is coming out. Love it. And thank you, Lisa, for contributing. Um, the next video that I'm going to be doing, I was going to do it later tonight, but I'll wait till tomorrow. This one went kind of long, but I'm going to be doing Creed 3, starring Michael B. Jordan, or as I like to call it, Rocky 9. Peace.